Welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, November 5th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the 2025 elections that took place last evening as Democrats shock the nation across all of the states from Virginia to New Jersey to California's Proposition 50 to New York City. All across the board here, Democrats did phenomenally in races and a multitude of elections that there was no silver lining for Republicans as they look to the end of the evening. In fact, in the cycle yesterday that came to a close, a widely anticipated election where Democrats were hoping they would make pretty substantive gains relative to their performance 4 years ago, 8 years ago, and so it came to be. Last night, Democrats won every single major race, and they did so by massive margins that were wildly outside the expectations that we see. Now, I'll be taking a look at my prediction tomorrow and comparing it as we get those final, trickled in votes across the board here. But generally speaking, the majority of these margins are set in stone, and what they tell us is that last night was all but a landslide in this race. We'll start off by talking about Virginia, where Abigail Spanberger was elected to the governorship by a 15-point margin across the state, a massive, massive performance leagues ahead of where the Democrats were in 2017, 2020, especially 2021, and looking at the state in the 2024 cycle, Abigail Spanberger is close to outrunning Kamala Harris in this state by nearly 10 points. And when we take a look at a lot of the down-ballot races that Republicans felt they might have an opportunity to actually narrow up those races. Newsflash, that was in fact not the case. Abigail Spanberger winning her race carried the Democrats across the finish line every single way. When you take a look at the lieutenant governor's race, Democrats won that by a pretty significant amount too. Ghazala Hashmi defeated John Reed by roughly 10 points. And as it came down to the attorney general's race, where Jay Jones saw that leaked text messages plagued the final days and weeks of his campaign, Jason Miyares, the Republican attorney general, lost his election to Jay Jones in this race by a margin, get this, larger than that of Kamala Harris's over Donald Trump in the 2024 presidential election in the state of Virginia. And so to put that into perspective, right, the 2024 cycle was not phenomenal for the Democratic Party, but their performance in the battleground states should have translated that Democrats, doing as well as they did in Virginia means that if she was to match, she being Kamala Harris, to match the Biden 2020 numbers, it stands to reason that every single swing state would have voted for the Democrats as it did in 2020, save the state of North Carolina. But that's not always the case. When you take a look at what we've seen across the board, what the results showed was that not only did the Democrats lose the swing states, but they lost considerable amounts of support in Virginia. Now, Virginia had never really been one of those states that was overwhelmingly enthusiastic for the Democratic Party, but last night's results showed something. And it also spoke not just to the governor election, where Abigail Spanberger shifted when it came down to a county-by-county basis, but let's see here, there's 95 counties in the state of Virginia. How many of them shifted to the left? 90 out of the 95 counties in the state of Virginia shifted to the left, and some of the largest ones, for instance, Prince William County with 161,000 votes, shifted 16 points to the left, replicated on the national stage. We'll talk about that a little bit later this week. But the point is, phenomenal results, but also the attorney general's race shows that a lot of voters in Virginia were willing to put aside what many voters saw as disqualifying in the text messages that were leaked from Jay Jones during his time as a House of Delegates member, that they were willing to choose that they still want him as Attorney General because they were so fierce in their opposition to Republicans statewide. And it wasn't just Virginia that this was contained to. New Jersey was hyped up as this state that was supposed to be much more competitive than it actually was. And I will admit, I thought this race was going to go to Mikey Sherrill by 7 points. I was off. I underestimated Mikey Sherrill's support margin-wise by nearly half. And the reason why was because all of the data leading up to the election swore up and down that Mikey Sherrill was going to have a 1 or 2 point race. I thought I was going too far on the left because historically, when you look at my 24 prediction, I overestimated Kamala Harris's support. So I thought maybe it might be happening again, that I might be off the margin here simply because the data might have been concealing a hidden Jack Ciattarelli vote of voters who said to the pollsters, I don't want to tell you I'm voting for Republicans, but I am, even though I might disapprove of Donald Trump. Evidently, that is not what we saw on Election Day. In fact, Mikey Sherrill's performance in the state is on par with that of what it was in 2017 against a lieutenant governor who had an approval rating of a governor in the single digits. Chris Christie had hit an 8% approval rating across the state of New Jersey. Looking at the performance here for Mikey Sherrill, for a race as hyped up as it was, they lost. The Republicans lost by a massive, massive amount. Virginia, New Jersey wildly exceeded the expectations for Democrats, but it didn't end there. In the state of California, Gavin Newsom's led Proposition 50 is set to pass by a larger margin than Kamala Harris's in this state. Wow. Proposition 50 might pass by nearly the same amount that the original redistricting proposition was put forth by Democrats in 2010. Led by Democrats, passed by Democrats in 2010. In a 65-35 margin, it is entirely possible that this result is identical. And the fact that it might seriously outrun Kamala Harris in this state not only shows that voters are engaged, listening, paying attention. I mean, they are voting in an off year in a proposition single constitutional amendment ballot question race. This is not governor. This is not senator. This is not congressional. This is not presidential. And yet you are going to find that you might just be 3 million votes off by total tabulation, if these numbers are correct, of a presidential election on a proposition. Oh yeah, voters are angry. Democrats are angry. Americans are angry. And they are turning out in election after election, from New Jersey to Virginia to California, yes, even over to New York City, where Zohran Mamdani is going to be the next mayor of the nation's largest city. All the naysaying from the right and from some of those on the left that swore up and down that Andrew Cuomo would defeat Mamdani, who cleared the majority mark in this city, that even an effort, if you were to tabulate all of the votes for Cuomo and all of the votes for Sliwa, combine them together, Mamdani still wins. The 2025 cycle was brutal, beyond belief for the GOP. This makes 2017 look like child's play. When you take a look at the elections in Virginia, it isn't just that Democrats also, too, won the races all across the state. The House of Delegates races, right now Democrats are at 64. To put that into perspective, the last time Democrats won this amount of seats was in 1987, when Ronald Reagan was finishing out his term, his second term as President of the United States, was the last time that Democrats held this amount of seats. Just 2 days ago, Democrats had 51 in the House of Delegates and were forecasted by some of the best metric points in the state to win 60 seats. They won 64, damn near a supermajority in the state. The only two outstanding votes, 40 and 34 Republicans, are probably going to win them, but a terrible sign for the GOP of what is to come. And that's because no matter how you cut it, mayoral election in New York City, ballot measure in California, Virginia governor's race, attorney general's race, lieutenant governor's race, and New Jersey governor's race. Massive changes here and a lot to really unpack. Whether that's the range of minority voters that have changed their minds on Republicans in just a year, whether that is the range of white working class voters that might have been all in for Trump and are all out for Republicans now because they see what this government shutdown is doing. They see what a Republican-held congressional Congress is doing. They see what the Oval Office is doing. And no matter how you cut it across the board, it is these races that are foretelling a dramatic victory for Democrats in 2026. This is the calm before the storm. This race in Virginia and in New Jersey and in California indicative of what to come in 2026 and beyond. Because as it stands right now, Republicans should truly be terrified about their chances and odds. Because it isn't going to end now. There are plenty of elections between now and November of 2026, and arguably some of the most important ones in November of 2026. Governor races, congressional races, Senate races, state legislative races, statewide races, a lot that could halt anything the Trump administration would like to do in the final 2 years. It would halt any and all progress of Republicans as they look to finish out Donald Trump's final time in office. And it may not happen. Because the Democrats have clearly the energy, the enthusiasm on their side. They have high propensity voters turning out in droves in random and obscure elections and in governor races that Republicans invested tens of millions of dollars in only to underperform Donald Trump, in some cases by nearly 10. And when you look at all of this, of what it was hyped up to be by the right, by Donald Trump, by those who represent conservative values, who made that adamant case, they swore these races would be competitive. In fact, they were not. And they tell us that 2026 probably won't be either. Looking at what this translates to on the national level, if Virginia's shift is indicative of anything to come on the national stage, let's take a look. Kamala Harris won this state by roughly 6 points. Let's round upwards to give Republicans that benefit. In Virginia, Abigail Spanberger's here up by, roughly 14, 15 points. Let's say 14%. That is an 8% improvement for the Democratic Party in just 1 year. Let's say you take the House results from the last cycle, shift them by 8 points to the right. This is what happens nationwide. Democrats go from the minority at 215 to the majority at 236, even more seats than what they had in 2018. Another example, take a look at the presidential race. Shift the national margin by roughly 8 points. Well, here's what you get. Kamala Harris would have won the election with 319 electoral votes, rather than lose it with 226. These results show and foretell a very interesting race for the GOP in the years to come. And what it shows at baseline is voters are angry, and that anger is turning into votes against the Republican Party. Because Virginia and New Jersey and California and New York City, again, are the calm before the storm. They are the states that had the mercy of election years being far in advance of the presidential cycle and a year out from a midterm. And they provide us fascinating and very important context in understanding exactly where the nation stands today. Because the fact remains, the GOP did not have a single successful election last evening. And that means something. It tells us the tides are turning, that voters are angry with their president, that voters have turned on the Oval Office and what this administration is doing, and they are translating it and channeling it into vote count in states where even races that might have been perceived as a done deal in the past, like the Virginia Attorney General's race, not only are not a done deal, but the candidate outperforms the last presidential election for a Democrat who's one of the higher performing Democrats in Virginia, given national circumstances, in the 21st century. Relative to the nation, Kamala Harris's performance in Virginia was better than that of Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John Kerry, George W. Bush, and not George W. Bush, sorry, Al Gore, and also Joe Biden, who, yes, won the state by the largest margin we've seen in over half a century. But he won the national popular vote by 4.5. He won the state by 10. That's a 5.5% difference. Donald Trump winning nationally by 1.5 and Kamala Harris winning by 6. That's a 7.5 point difference. Meaning that performance in and of itself, while maybe not all that impressive at face value, actually was quite good. And even then, That was the worst performance for Democrats, which is still an outperformance relative to that stronger performance in 2024. All to say, these races across the board have been incredible for the Democratic Party, not just in Virginia, not just in New Jersey, not just in New York City, and not just in California, but all across the board. We'll talk about Georgia later on this week. We'll talk about Pennsylvania as well, but there is just so much content to cover. Not a lot of time to cover it, but I encourage you to join me for the ride. There is so much to unpack over the coming weeks, and I hope you will be with me as we go through it, because it's going to get a little rocky and a lot of info thrown at you at once. But I promise you, it is incredibly important, really awesome to look at, and some fascinating results as of last evening that we will take a look at for many weeks to come, indicating what might happen in a year's time in the 2026 midterm elections. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2025 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.